It was one of the most wonderful and empowering experiences that I've had.
Brenda, I want to thank you for taking the time to be here.
It's really good to be here, Lance.
All right. This is our second time doing this. I forgot something on the first time, but we had a very good talk, and you're going to get to hear what it is. You're going to get the best part of it this time. No, I shouldn't say that. Should I tell them? Anyway, I did.
It's fine.
Now, let's start off with, I know where you were born. I know you were born in California.
Uh-huh.
And then you moved to Utah.
That's right, when I was 3.
When you're 3 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I know you come from a family of 9 children. You're number 3.
Number 3.
First girl.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that you had to take care of your younger sisters and brothers, actually.
And brothers. Mm-hmm.
You had to do all of them. You told me about your mother and father, too, and unfortunately, your father's 94, you said, right?
My father just turned 94.
94.
We had a birthday party. I flew to go see him. He lived in Utah still. And I said, "How are you, Dad?" And he goes, "I'm fine. I just did 30 push-ups." Yeah. And then he just, on the 4th of July, just ran a 5K. Well, he didn't run. He walked really fast with that cane in his hand. So he was a very determined person to get through that 5K.
He has no real issues. He's doing really well at 94.
He's doing really well. And maybe I get some of that from him.
Oh, you do. You do. That's beautiful.
Yeah, hopefully I'll live a long life.
But you told me your mother passed a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Just during COVID, 2020, you said?
Yes, my mother did. She caught COVID before there was any vaccine. Mm-hmm. And she was on air for a little while, recovered from that, started a recovery, and then just relapsed back into just, whether it was long COVID or not, I don't know, but never fully recovered. And she ended up passing away in a nursing home, never having returned home. Mm. So it was very sad. I did spend some of the last moments with her. I flew out there and, the day I flew back, the next morning she passed away. Mm. So I did. I'm fortunate I got to see her one more time.
One more time before that.
Mm-hmm.
So you told me that also you got to see, you knew your grandmother and grandfather on her side?
Right. So my grandparents on my dad's side were already gone before I was born. But my grandparents on my mom's side were immigrants from Germany. And they had come shortly between World War I and World War II. They came from Hamburg, Germany, and took a boat all the way to the U.S., and then they settled in California.
But they came in through the East Coast?
They came through Ellis Island.
Ellis Island, of course.
Actually, different times, because my grandfather came with his family first, got money sent for her, and then she came. And my grandparents were just trying to make ends meet their whole life, but they had joined the Mormon church, and they were excited to go to the U.S. where it was founded, and it was a big exodus of Germany at the time. Hamburg was devastated by World War I, and they had big hopes to come to America. So they came and they went to California, and they were actually, my grandmother was a housekeeper for a while before she had children, and my grandfather was always a janitor, and I never knew this until recently when I was looking through some of my records. Mm-hmm. So yeah, very humble beginnings.
That's interesting. So you told me also growing up, you said that you weren't particularly sports-minded and you weren't particularly academic. No. You were both.
I was. Yeah, so I have 2 older brothers, and I always thought I could do what they could do, and I wanted to prove it. So I would just go following them on all of their play dates, and, well, you don't call them play dates, like when they'd go to friends' houses. Mm-hmm. And At one point, I was told I couldn't play because I was a girl. That was my first vision into what it meant to be a girl.
Now, how old were you when that happened?
That was, it was just
You're really
kindergarten.
small. Kindergarten.
Really small.
They just basically said you can't go with them.
Yeah, and it wasn't
So-
my brothers. It was their friend. Their friend didn't want me to play.
Didn't want you to play with them, okay, because you're a girl.
Right.
Okay.
So that was my
But
first.
it hadn't hit you, but you didn't know. You hadn't picked up any of this at all yet.
Right.
You told me there was a time when it really hit you. We're going to get to that.
My mom was pretty strong.
Right.
Other woman. She didn't work outside the home when I was young and never did. My father was always the breadwinner, but her presence was felt. She was a strong woman by her actions, what she ended up doing, how she interacted. But I'm not trying to paint a completely rosy picture of her, but I think that there's a few things I learned from her. She went on a mission for the Mormon Church.
When she was like 18 or something
When
like
she
that?
she was actually older. She was in her 20s, about 25.
All right.
And so she went out and did that, and that thought that made me want to do it. So I ended up going.
Well, she told you how great a time she had and everything? She made it seem really pleasant or something?
It wasn't necessarily what she said. My parents weren't very good talkers. I've learned to become a talker. But it was just the fact that she had done it. Okay. And so I knew it was open to me.
Okay, that's something you knew you could do.
Yeah, so I knew I could do that.
Right.
And I've seen people go to college. I knew people could do that, and even if you're a woman, but I wasn't ever pushed toward that as a Mormon.
Right. But you said also when you watched the women, as you got older and you saw the women that did go to college, particularly if they went to Brigham Young,
right?
There was a certain pattern that you said that seemed to perturb you a little bit. You didn't like it so much.
Yeah, so when I was just graduating from high school, a lot of the women of my friend group, about 80%, went and got married right away, didn't go to college. The ones that did went to BYU because that's where you go to find a husband. And so that was still a time in my life where I had to decide to do something different. I graduated from high school, worked a year, and then realized that I needed to do some education. I was in the music field. My major was vocal performance.
But you also play piano.
And I play piano, yeah. Yeah. So that's what my focus was. That was a good topic for a Mormon woman. Okay. You know, music's always needed.
See, there's something, Brenda, you make me think, because you really get on the Mormon part because you were so...
I was very affected by it.
And you still are. You're still a part of Mormon. But you want to change it. You're trying to mix it up a little bit.
Right.
And to bring some equalness to it, I think.
Well, I did see... It wasn't until I just ran up against like a wall that I realized that things aren't quite equal.
Now, when was this? When did you...
And this was more when I was coming of age and teenager. My brothers were all in the scouting program. I was not. That they didn't have that program within the church group that I was in. But my next door neighbor was part of the Girl Scout program, and so I joined. And my next door neighbor was living in Salt Lake at the time, and she was not a member of the church, and that's kind of a big thing in Mormon life, at least in Utah, that you aren't a member. Unfortunately, that's a problem. But I had a really good time. I learned a lot of stuff that the boys did. I learned to hike. I learned to do all these things, and I got my badges. You know, I sold Girl Scout cookies. And when I went from the brownie stage to the regular Girl Scout stage, my parents put a stop to it. And I'm not quite sure why, but it also was in the 70s, and it also was during the time that ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment, was starting to be passed. I never really knew what ERA stood for at that time. I just knew I didn't want it. But I didn't know that I did want it. But feminism was not really looked upon as a good thing. That was a thing that people called you if you were doing something wrong.
Right. I understand.
Doing something out of place. So I know things have changed within the Mormon Church since that time. This is the 80s, the 70s and 80s. This is what it was like. There was no push to do anything except be a mom, have children, which is a great thing to do. I just thought it was interesting that fathers can have families and have children, but why is it that they also get to pursue whatever they want? They're wide open to any possibilities, and that's kind of bothered me. Not kind of, but it really bothered me. And I didn't know how to articulate it at the time, that it was just this unequal relationship. Because I felt that way, and I just wanted to change something. And I've always been working toward trying to empower women in different ways.
How? Give me some.
I actually became a martial artist when I was having my children. My son was just about a 1-year-old when I started doing it. And I did it in the US, didn't start here. But I had been here before because I had gone on a mission here to
This was
Tokyo.
the only mission you did was here.
Mm-hmm.
And you told me you went to Fujisawa at that time.
I went to Fujisawa in the beginning. I also lived in Hamamatsu.
I know Hamamatsu.
And Hakuraku in Yokohama.
Okay.
And Hachioji.
So how long is a mission? 3 years or 2 years?
It was 1 year and a half for women and 2 years for men. There's another difference there. Don't know why. You couldn't go as a woman until you're 21, whereas 19 was the age back then. Now they've changed it, so men can go at 18 and women don't get to go until 19. So there's always that difference there.
Right.
We're treated a little differently. So I enjoyed my mission. And
How long
I learned.
You only here for a year and a half?
I was here for a year and a half.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you got to go, you had a couple of months in each place. That's what you're saying.
Right. So It wasn't up to me. It was at the discretion of the mission president where I went. So they would say, they'd call me up on a Tuesday, and on Thursday I had to move if they said to move.
And you don't know what that was based on? No matter
that was based on like pairing people together or...
But you're doing things while you're there. You're teaching and you're starting programs or something, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
So couldn't you be in the middle of something when they called you?
Yeah. Yeah, but one companion would always stay there.
Okay, so
for continuity.
They keep it going.
They'd only get one movement at a time.
I see.
It wasn't the best situation.
I understand.
Yeah,
but that was the same for both, for boys and girls.
Yeah, that was for
everyone
both.
had that. Okay, that sounds like the military to me too. The military is the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, it trains you for good military service.
It does. It does. Do a lot of people go in?
I don't think a lot of people do, but I don't know. It depends on where you're from.
Okay.
I know that my brother got solicited in high school. He joined the Navy.
The Navy, okay.
And he got a high enough score that he became intelligence and learned Russian. It was during the Cold War, so he learned Russian and he worked in that capacity.
This is your older brother?
This is my younger brother. He's 1 year younger than I am. My two older brothers did different things, but my younger brother, he went via military.
He's the only one that went in the military?
He's the only one. My father did, because everybody did.
He had no choice, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He was World War II, right? Your father?
Yeah.
Was World War II. He's my father's.
He actually didn't
He was in Korea.
need it.
Was he in Korea? Well,
he didn't actually, during the time he was conscripted, he didn't have to go out.
To go out because we'd already won the war, right?
Right.
That's what I was thinking. So
I can't remember exactly when it was.
If anything, he would have gone to the Korean War.
Mm-hmm.
Because your father's but he's old enough to have gone to World War II. But they would have finished.
It would have been finished before he was old
Almost,
enough,
yeah.
I think. So
Just
he'd been
about.
15 and in 45.
Right. When you went through high school, you finished high school, then you went into college. Went
I
straight into
waited a
college.
year.
You waited for a year.
I
What'd you
did
do
some
during
work.
that year?
I just worked as an office manager.
Okay.
Well, you called it secretary back then.
Okay,
I just
right.
did typing and things like that. Wasn't happy with what was going on. I didn't feel I was raised to my potential. Wasn't fulfilling what I needed to do. And so I said, that's when I decided to go to school. And it was my decision. And it wasn't because I wanted to just go to school to find a husband, which is a lot of the reasons why the women were going at the time. And that's when I went. And after about a year, I decided I want to go on a mission. My parents did that. And I just felt like I needed to go see the world. Now, I didn't really know much about the world. I stayed in Utah my whole life. So
you came over here. What was it like? What was your first impression? You come because you were nervous before then. So when you came to Japan, what was the first impression?
I was 21 years old and I was a missionary. And so I came all by myself, really. I came on Oshogatsu. And they had a lot of different types of food. And I really had not delved into Japanese food at all. I didn't even really know what it was. So my first impression, some of the stuff was a little different. And I grew to like it. But I think, for example, sushi was a hard one for me. But I love sushi now.
How long did it take you to adapt to sushi?
Probably about a year.
Same here.
Because I didn't really choose to do it very often.
Right.
But after a while, it became very appetizing.
Mm-hmm.
It's
an acquired taste.
It's a very acquired thing. But I saw Japan and thought it was an exciting place. I lived in a lot of different places just outside Tokyo. I was in the Tokyo Mission, Tokyo South Mission, and I loved the way that the Japanese people were looking at nature and enjoying nature, like different types a year. They paid attention to when the blossoms were out.
Had you ever done that prior to coming
And
here?
before that, no. I noticed, but there's no focus in the U.S. like that.
No, there was no worshiping it and loving it and really committing to the idea of nature.
So there's a lot of things I really liked about Japan. The minimalist lifestyle, ikebana, I did dabble in that a little bit. I was really intrigued, and so when I went back after I was done with my mission, I went back to BYU and I changed my major from vocal performance to Asian studies and just learned more and more about Japan.
But where did you meet your husband?
So I met my husband here in Japan.
Okay.
We were both out on a mission on the same time, and he was working in the main office. And so the first time I went to go see what kind of textbooks I could use to learn Japanese, because I really needed to learn better Japanese. And he gave me some good pointers. That was the first meeting. And the second time we really talked was back at BYU. And we were in the Japan Club. And that was really fun because I met a lot of return missionaries there. We all loved Japan. And we ended up working together to do a reunion for some of the people that were here at the time. And during that time, I didn't really know this, but his roommate wanted to date me. And so he asked my husband he asked Jeff to introduce us. And so he was going to set us up. And in doing so, he decided not to set us up after all because he wanted to date me. And I didn't know anything about this until later on.
Okay.
So he just asked me out and we went out one of the first things we did was go to a Japanese movie at BYU. They had, a foreign film group, and we watched movies together in Japanese movies.
Okay.
So from the beginning, it was one thing we had in common that I really brought us together. One of the times in my life that was really memorable, obviously, was coming to Japan, something I'd never known before. The second time was meeting my husband. I think those two things happening in my life has really changed me for the better.
That's beautiful.
I think that my husband's always been a feminist. I didn't know I was a feminist until I got accused of it when I wanted to just do the same things guys did.
And what do you think? When did it start to hit you that you're being called a feminist?
It was said by some people in my husband's family even that...
But you're an adult by this time. So
yes, yeah.
That's when it started happening. But prior to that, you were pretty much, towing the line, and you weren't saying anything, and you were...
Right. Jeff really gave me a voice too. He wanted to know how I felt about things. So that was my first experience with trying to figure out what I did like, because that was not even a thing before. There was women just aren't asked in that culture.
You mean I can have a feeling?
Yeah, and I see this in Japanese culture too, that women aren't really given the same voice. There's a lot of similarities between the two. And during my studies, both here and at BYU, I realized that there's a lot of things that Mormon women and Japanese women can learn from each other. And I think there's a lot of things that women in general can learn from somebody who comes from a very closed society where women aren't giving the full breadth of freedoms, to understand what it takes to push out of that mold and what it takes to become that strong woman that you want to be. It's not revered, it's discouraged, and I think even in some societies still we have this problem. I think we have some in the US as well. We have this idea that women shouldn't be in certain roles when they really do have the capability. So this is when I started to push out of the mold, I started to really realize how hard it was for most people. So I vowed to help other women to feel empowered. And I am not the kind of person that wants a woman to go one way or the other. I want them to decide. I want them to have a decision. And so that's what I've always tried to do.
How old were you when you got married?
I got married at 23.
23.
So I didn't quite make it to 25.
Right, you felt safe.
But 21, not married, was actually
still kind of
weird.
Yes.
Back in the 1980s.
Right.
When I was that age. And so I remember when I came back from my mission, the dating system had changed a lot. And so I noticed a lot of guys didn't want to hear what I had to say, but until I met my husband.
Okay.
So that was another shock, I think, where I realized there's such a difference and it's not equal.
I think maybe when you came back, the thing is, men were being put under so much pressure because when you were growing up, girls were always told, be careful when you're dealing with little boys, especially their feelings. Make sure you let them win sometimes. Don't be so hard on them. Listen, don't show them that you're that smart. Am I right?
Yes. How did you know that?
No, I know, because that's the way that girls were being taught then.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, now, girls aren't told a thing about boys. They want to know why they don't want them. And they're all running to Asia, where the women still are. They're sharp, but they'll still treat them kind. They won't show them they actually have a 3rd degree in martial arts. Yeah. They'll be kind. No, they're very quiet about it. But if you push them, then all of a sudden you find, I've got a tiger here. Really...
We don't even have that so much in Mormon society anymore. You still have some of that, where certain people aren't wanting to date someone who has their own mind, speaks their own mind. But it is changing a little bit, which is good. And every time I have a chance, I tell women whatever capacity, to be a strong woman, and you can do it. And I used to teach martial arts, so that helped there. I wanted to feel comfortable walking down the street. I was always afraid. I felt the way I grew up caused more anxiety, and I just was fearful to be outside of the norm and outside by myself. And I think that what was one of the best things I did was when I learned a martial art, because this is, you're fending for yourself. You know how to interact and act with people. And for the first time, I felt walking down the street alone in San Francisco at night, I did not fear. And I wasn't afraid at all, because I knew I could get out of most any situation. And I think that most men don't realize how that feels. Because when, for example, when my husband walks down the street, no one's going to say anything to him. But when I'm alone, there's a difference. You see that. But having that under your belt, literally,
right.
under your black belt,
right.
You get to understand more about what it feels like and how empowering it is for a man to walk around today and feel that. Not every man feels that way, I understand. It's a spectrum. Most women trying to get out of that, it's really hard. Trying to get that sense of purpose and sense of being a strong advocate for themselves.
You told me also that you really came to your own when you joined the club. Because you said prior to that time, you were really feeling unheard. Of course, your husband listened to you, but for the most part, you'd grown up with an emotional feeling that people aren't going to listen to me, and what do I have to offer? Even though I want to offer something, what is it going to be? Because no one's listening to anything now.
Yeah, well, it's just that's kind of how it is growing up in this culture that I grew up in, and I think also here, where the women's not asked all the time what they think about things. One of the funniest things, when I first came to Japan, wearing Japanese pantyhose, it was the most awful thing ever.
You had never worn pantyhose at all?
No, in the U.S. But in Japan...
Women didn't do that?
No, they did. But in the U.S., there were better pantyhose.
Oh, they weren't as... These are old.
I said, who in the world is making these? I realized men are making that for women. They're making feminine products. They're making all this stuff for women. And they don't know the first thing about what they want.
Another analogy I'd like to use is this. I came over here and I worked out at Nitai, which is the top gymnastics college here. I was a gymnast. And the girls never won any of the competitions. And I found out why. Who do you think was teaching them the balance beam and the bars? Men.
Okay.
They didn't have female. No, they did stuff like a guy would do, just in a female body. No, they weren't going to win anything.
Our balance is much different.
Right?
Yeah, our balance is much different. You have hips.
Completely different.
This is an important time for us to become more aware of each other, both male, female. Realize that we both have a lot to bring to the table. And so when I was here at the American Club, it was the first time. I wasn't even going to become a governor, but my husband put it in my ear. He said, "Oh, look, they're like there's a governorship like election. You should try." And I thought, "Well, really? I should try that? Do you think they want me?" Anyway, I did, and I never looked back. It was one of the most wonderful and empowering experiences that I've had. And it was one of the first times I started to feel like I was my own person, not borrowing from other people and not asking for permission. I think that this is where most women need to get. But unfortunately, there's not always the opportunity to get to that.
Not everybody's going to be able to join an American club or any club for that matter.
Right. Or be elected to a board, which I was elected to.
Sure.
And I was very happy that people listened to me. So that was one of my favorite experiences.
And that's later in life for you too. I mean, it's not like you were just getting out of college or anything. Because this is after 2 children. You have 2 children, right?
Yes. So my daughter and my son, and I think you just can't underestimate how hard it is when you are in a mindset to change that mindset. Almost impossible for many people. They never, their whole life, are able to break out of that. I'm one of those few that hasn't been able to do that. And I think that if we're going to empower women, that we need to help them break out of that mode, give them opportunities, let them find their wings. Like raising a child, it's something you have to do on your own. Sure. The children you have to let them go and let them start. But I think that men really get a better sense of that because of all the empowerment that they get. It's all expected. Things are expected of them. They are entering into the workforce on a different foot. They can do whatever they want. And I think that needs to happen for women.
You made a good point the first time we did the podcast.
Yes.
This didn't get aired because I didn't have the cameras. That was that half of our society is not being used and utilized.
Yeah, 50%. That's a large, I believe Japan could get out of the malaise that they have if they really put that to good use. I think that immigration's a good thing. When you have a lot of different people coming to the table, I think that having women have more responsibilities is a good thing because you've got different perspectives.
That kind of happened here.
Yeah, I think that could happen here.
No, but I said it kind of did. I think they call it the lost decade in the 90s when they hollowed out all of the middle management jobs. And you know what they replaced it with? Women. Women took over all those jobs. That's why they're driving around in these cars by themselves and deciding they don't want to get married.
That's very good.
Because they can do it. However, they don't get paid the same amount the men got during that time. And it's still, they have a ways to go. But Japan plays things safe, and they're very slow. They're very risk adverse, I like to say.
Yeah, they are.
So they'll take their time, but the women feel they have a lot of autonomy here. They can get jobs different places. They won't get the same pay, and they do have to serve tea. And when you get in the real Japanese structure, it's not going to happen. So that's why most of the Japanese women that learn English, they learn it so they can work for a foreign company.
Yeah. Yeah, the tea thing's interesting too.
Isn't it something? They still have to serve tea. They still have to do it, and they better not walk in front of their boss.
Well, my husband, when he was first here, and we were living here, he was working for a company called Mac English, and it was a software company. And one of the women there was working in finance. She was a legitimate partner. They went to a Japanese firm to talk, and then the guy at the firm ordered her to go bring coffee for them or tea. And my husband refused to let her because he wanted them to know that is not appropriate for someone who's coming into your company. But I think that our social norms, because we play it so conservatively, it ceases to have meaning sometimes, but we don't necessarily give it the chance because we're so used to the status quo. I thought that was really shocking that he would do that. He would stand up and do that.
I've done that with my assistant because she's actually my business partner. She owns part of one of our companies. But when we did the scanner business, we'd go places and they would tell her to do things. No, don't do it. And when she was at the chamber, not just the Japanese, I'm talking about foreign guys would ask her to do so. I said, excuse me.
Yeah.
She doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
So this is something we all have to be aware of.
That's true. And I think we're getting better. And this type of thing happens. The more we talk about it and communication, I think the world's getting better because we can communicate faster now. Something can happen on the other side of the world, and in a minute we'll know. Less than that.
Yeah.
Right?
So we unfortunately, our news is mostly negative, a lot of the things we get. But we have such opportunities. Our social interactions, though, are suffering because we're glued to our phones, our internet, and it's creating a lot more feelings of loneliness, I think, here and all across the world, where virtual doesn't mean better necessarily. We need to get together. And I did talk about Switzerland before.
You did. You said that's the Japan of Europe?
Yes, so that's what they call it. When I moved to Switzerland shortly after I finished treatment for breast cancer. And what I found there was a group of people that value this more of a not equal society, but like a more of they value social relationships. And I would see them, just like in Japan, valuing nature and those kinds of things. That's what the Swiss do. Everybody goes and enjoys hiking. Almost every person has a hiking group, or they go hiking, or they go. Hiking is not really considered hiking in Switzerland. It's, if you go 5 miles, then maybe it can start to be a hike. They call it a walk. So I would go on a fitness walk with my friends a lot. But one of the things I do remember is the social interaction. Every single person was encouraged to join a group, a club, whatever it was. And so they kept social.
And did they really get to know each other?
Yeah, so rather than just see each other, hi, bye, and small talk, these are people that really did get to know each other. They had a lot of deep conversations. Retired people would get together with their buddies, and they'd make it a weekly occurrence so that you would stay connected and not be so lonely, because I think one of our problems now is the loneliness that we feel in the modern world. One of the things I take from this, and yet, living through COVID, where it was very difficult to be social, is that we need to value our personal interactions more than anything else. I'm a 2-time breast cancer survivor, so I really value and understand a little bit better what really is important in life, and that is having connection with others. And really not anything to do with money. It's nothing to do with how much money you have. You can't buy happiness. You can buy a lot of other things. And we've kind of gotten a little crazy with all the billionaires buying whatever they want, but it doesn't really buy you happiness. The thing that I realized, and what I crave more, in this idea that we only have each other, we are happier when we're with other people. I like to take that as one of my mantras, to always be social and connecting with others. The richness that comes from life is from everything. All the different plants, animals, we're all living together in some symbiotic relationship. And it's not always going to be great. It's going to have some bumps in the road, but what we produce is better than what it would have been on our own.
That's so true. They say if 2 people think the same way, 1 isn't necessary.
Yes.
Brenda, before we end this podcast, I always like to ask this question. If you could go back in time and meet the younger Brenda and give her advice based upon what you know now, what advice would you give her, and how old would she be?
She would be a teenager. Don't stop fighting for what you believe. The world gets better. It gets better slowly sometimes, but don't be afraid. I lived in fear a lot when I was younger about different things, and I wasn't able to really be who I wanted to be. I think that life is a series of times where you fall down, but you always need to get back up, try again, and to never undervalue yourself and what you can bring to the table, because our worst enemy obviously is ourselves. You need to keep going and to believe in what you have to offer.
I don't think you could have given yourself better advice. Thank you so much, Brenda.
Thank you, Lance. It's been a pleasure.
I want to thank all of you for watching or listening to this podcast. And never forget, it's all on loan, so continue to reach for the stars.
Because you're too blessed to be stressed.